There are lots of different types of feedback. So, in this video, I want to explain what some of the terms mean. First, let's look at the distinction between formal and informal feedback. We'll start with informal feedback. Informal feedback is spontaneous. It happens on the spur of the moment. It isn't planned. It just happens. And it often happens as a result of something that is done correctly. We observe someone doing something good and we give them praise. Informal feedback can happen at a chance meeting, or it can happen in the normal run of things as a manager wanders around their department and observes the work of their colleagues. Formal feedback, on the other hand, is planned. It happens for a specific reason at a specific time for a specific purpose. It doesn't need to be a grand purpose. It can be a regular planned meeting where a manager sits down with their colleague and gives them feedback. But formal feedback tends to happen away from the day-to-day workplace, and it happens for a specific reason. Because of this, another characteristic of formal feedback is that it often involves deliberate observation or data gathering to provide the evidence for the feedback. The next term to look at is comparative feedback, and comparative feedback references performance level against a standard. And there are typically two forms of standard that we find. One is an external objective standard that is often set by the procedures, the policies, the requirements, the job description, or the competency framework within the organisation. But the second type of comparative feedback is a comparison between your performance and the performance of one of your colleagues or someone who is held up as an appropriate benchmark against which to measure your performance. We need to use this latter type of feedback with care. It does give people some understanding of how they're doing, but it rarely gives the specific information they need to adjust their behaviours, make different choices, and improve their performance. Third is the distinction between judgmental and non-judgmental feedback, sometimes known as evaluative and non-evaluative feedback. Judgmental feedback gives a clear evaluation of the standard of the performance that's observed. Often that evaluation can be subjective, but it always sets out some measure of how good that observed performance is. This allows the receiver of the feedback to gauge their level of performance. Now, judgmental feedback can take three basic types. It can be positive, it can be critical, or sometimes referred to as negative feedback, or it can be balanced, and we'll look at those in a moment. But before we do, the alternative to judgmental feedback is non-judgmental feedback, where we offer data, we offer evidence, but we don't offer any evaluation of how good it is, what it means, how we feel about it. However, with non-judgmental feedback, it's very useful sometimes to invite the performer to give their own evaluation on the feedback that you've given. The real value of non-judgmental feedback is that it invites the performer to make their own judgments and therefore to better understand the feedback that you've given. For me, there is another benefit of non-judgmental feedback. As soon as you offer judgments about someone's performance, it can create defensiveness. Whereas non-judgmental feedback, just offering the evidence, it's harder for people to feel defensive, and therefore it can sometimes be easier to move the conversation into a rational discussion about the changes that are going to help to increase performance. The fourth distinction to draw is one that arose from the idea of judgmental feedback. It's the distinction between critical, positive, and balanced performance feedback. We need to use critical or negative feedback with great care, because of course it can be massively demotivating. I prefer the word critical because negative just sounds so negative. Critical performance feedback is best used when the performance level is very low compared to the required standard, and is particularly good where the learner is at an early stage in their development and therefore is expecting to be corrected. Correcting big mistakes to raise someone to a standard level of performance is often the best way to get them there. However, once they do achieve this standard of performance, then it's time to rein back on your critical feedback. Professor Andrew Milner, who at the time was at the University of Minnesota, worked with his colleagues and discovered that negative interactions with your boss are likely to have 6 times the impact of positive interactions. This means that negative feedback will have more impact than positive feedback, and therefore you need to use it with care. There will be times when it is highly appropriate, but there will be other times when it's not. If you are going to use critical feedback, then spell out what you've observed and what is wrong about it, and then create a discussion about how to do it. Move rapidly to a forward future focus. Critically, don't offer any judgments about the person themselves or their capabilities. And importantly, don't reprimand them for something that they simply didn't know how to do. And perhaps most important of all, if at all possible, do it in person. And if you can't do it in person, then find the medium which most closely approximates to that. Praise can grow us like sunlight grows a flower. Positive feedback can be liberating, it can be energizing, it can be motivating, and it can be highly developmental as well. Positive feedback is about only talking about the things that the person does well and to offer praise and support for that. It's far easier to develop a strength than it is to correct a weakness, which is one of the reasons why positive feedback really works. It helps us to see what we're good at, and it lifts us up. It helps us to develop what we're good at into a more systematic habit and to build on that knowledge. But what say many people about the things that we do wrong? If you're just going to give me positive performance feedback, then how will I know about what I'm doing wrong? Well, the reality is that most people who are performing at a high level know about their own mistakes. Highlighting them does not help them to learn. It just shows that you're being picky and you're not recognizing the bulk of their performance. But there is another very sophisticated way in which positive performance feedback can be very powerful for particular underperformers. Because there are some people whose underperformance is so constant that constant reprimands and critical feedback isn't helping. It's not working, and if it's not working, you need to try something different. And there is a possibility that these people have a psychology that's wired to want that critical feedback. It makes them feel real. They've never had positive feedback in their life. So the only way that they can get feedback is to do something wrong and get told off for it. And if that's the case, telling them off for the things they do wrong, giving that critical feedback, is rewarding the behaviour that you don't want. So withdraw that reward. Don't give critical feedback, but wait till they do something well. Something tiny, but something is right. And then give positive feedback about that. Retrain them to recognise that they can get the feedback they crave by doing good things, and that if they do bad things, they're not going to get it. And very quickly, you may shift their psychology. And there's 3 steps to giving great positive feedback. First, tell them exactly what action they took that was right. Second, tell them how that action helped, how it helped you, how it helped them, how it helped the organisation. And third, express your appreciation in as honest and sincere a way as you can. We also need to think about balanced feedback. Now, balanced feedback balances the critical and the positive comments, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are in even balance. If someone's performance leans massively towards one side or the other, then you will choose your balance appropriately to fairly reflect the impact that you want to have. As you'd expect, both the positive and the critical feedback needs to be supported by evidence, and you need to prepare well. Many people think that the best way to do this is with what is sometimes known as the feedback sandwich. But as you'll see in a future video, when we look at the feedback sandwich, this does not work well. However, in the same video, I will tell you what the alternative is that works really well for you. However, for now, I want to provide you with a simple framework that works really well, and I call it the AID framework. Structure your feedback in 3 chunks. The first is to describe the action that you've observed. Secondly, describe the impact that it had. And thirdly, as a result, tell them what they should do in the future. What changes they should make, what they should continue to do, what they should stop doing. There are a lot of different types of feedback. I hope that now we've reached the end of this video, you understand what each of them is, and in future videos we'll look at how to do it well. Please do give a thumbs up if you like this video. There'll be loads more great management courses content, so please do subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of it. I look forward to seeing you in the next video, and in the meantime, keep learning.